this time we get to talk about Persona 4, which is probably I would say it's the most famous among anime circles, just because it's been around for so long. It's been out for 10 years now, and until 3 years ago, it was the newest Persona game that existed that was actually out, because Persona 5 got nulled up in development hell the same way that Shin Megami Tensei 5 is at the moment. RIP. So it's a lot more positive. It gets compared to Scooby-Doo a lot, whereas Persona 3 is a lot more miserable. It does have some dark elements. There are themes of domestic violence, violence against women. There's quite a few scenes that are designed to make you uncomfortable along those angles. I wouldn't say there's anything quite as bad as there was in Persona 3 with regards to the suicide motif, but there's definitely some content in here that could upset people, so let's just say there's a reason it's got its certificate, and be good to yourselves. So, the plot and setting for Persona 4 is completely separate from Persona 3. It's still in Japan, but this time, we're in a rural town in the middle of nowhere. It's sort of arable farmland type countryside. It's quite near to the mountains. They go skiing at one point. It's about an hour's train journey away from Tokyo, including a transfer to a local line. The main character, Soji Seta, transfers there for his second year of high school, and he doesn't know anybody. It's the town where his mum grew up, but he's lived in the city his whole life, it's implied, so he literally doesn't know anybody here. He's a complete stranger. He hasn't seen his uncle, who he's going to stay with, since he was a baby, and so he's basically going to live with strangers for a year. And he's very kind of emotionally closed off at the beginning for understandable reasons. Unfortunately, the day after he moves there, a murder victim is found on a telegraph pole, hanging upside down, with no apparent means of death visible, even upon autopsy. It's a complete mystery. Unfortunately for Soji, his uncle that he's staying with is a detective in the local police department, and it's not a big department. So when a murder case pops up, it's kind of his uncle's job to more or less single-handedly solve it. So his 6-year-old, who, it says niece, it's supposed to say cousin. I'm not going to remake the video, I'll edit the slideshow. She's 6, and Soji's like, hey, like, are you okay? And she's like, yep, I'm fine. I'm home alone all the time. And he's like, well, that's heartbreaking. So he goes to bed, and he's staring at the TV screen, turned off TV screen, when suddenly it lights up, and it's kind of fuzzy, and for some reason he's compelled to go and stick his hand in the TV, and it goes in, which is bizarre. So he tries to pull it out, and he stumbles backwards and hits his head on the coffee table, which is very dignified of him, and tries to tell his friends at school the next day what happened, and they were like, yeah, sure your hand went in the TV. Let's go to Junaire's, which is the local department store, and find a TV that this loser can stick his hand into. So they do. I stole that joke, by the way. That wasn't my joke. They go there, and he sticks his hand in the TV, and they're all like, oh, shit. And then they actually go inside the TV, and discover a whole other world, their kind of alternate dimension of their town, where they learn to summon personas and fight shadows. Sounding familiar yet? Together with some more of their school friends, they form the investigation team, because they work out that the murder cases are connected to the TV world, and they want to try and make sure there are no more murders. The core themes of this game, there's a reason that the main theme of it has the chorus, reach out to the truth. There's a lot of themes about truths and falsehoods and white lies and various forms of deception. Lots of themes about how the media impacts our lives, even in a small town like Inaba. There's a lot about how avoiding issues doesn't help. The available romances are optional this time. There is a romance flag, and you can continue your social link with a girl, because they are all girls, by opting for the platonic version of the social link. Some of the girls won't be very happy with it, but you won't be punished by the game for not dating anybody. You will be punished by the game, sort of, not in a gameplay way, more in a kind of guilt-trippy way, for dating more than one girl. So choose wisely and decide what kind of guy you want your protagonist to be. All the romances are with girls. There was originally a romance with the best friend character. It got all the way through development, right up to localization and localized voice acting, which is usually one of the last stages that a piece of story for an Atlas game gets. And then they dummied it out. We don't know for sure why, but there's strong evidence that it was corporate meddling, that they didn't want, because he basically admits a crush on you. There's strong evidence that they didn't want basically dude bros feeling insecure about their sexuality because a male character was hitting on you, even though you could turn him down and there would be no further mention of it. Bring it back. So we're going to talk about the party members. They're all quite fun. Lots of them are quite stupid. There's no other way to put it. There are a lot of dumbasses and himbos in this party. It's really good. It leads to a lot of comedic situations that are genuinely kind of funny, which is refreshing. So our first guy is our protagonist, Soji. He is interesting because he's actually pretty strongly characterized, despite more than Persona 3 protagonist being supposed to be a blank slate that the player can project onto. In the anime and the manga, he has a very strong personality that just happens to be very quiet and passive, especially at the beginning. Throughout the story, he slowly becomes more confident and almost more secure in himself. So one of the main things in Persona 4 is that the characters get to face their own shadows, their own sort of like a Freudian id, the version of themselves that doesn't care about consequences or other people. It just wants what it wants, and you only get to meet Soji's shadow if you watch episode 26 of the main animation. I recommend, personally, enjoying Persona 4 in whatever format you want, the game, the manga, the anime, and then making sure you go back and watch that episode 26, because chronologically it happens at the end of the game. So I don't want to spoil people by talking about the general setting or how it happens, but it's really good and it really ties together his kind of character arc, really. If you're interested in him, I do actually recommend picking up the manga or the anime over the game, just because in the game he's very much more of a blank slate that you can choose how to characterize. If you want to get to know him as a character, you do much better picking up the manga by Shuji Sakabe, or picking up the animation, the vanilla animation. The golden animation is more of a kind of an addition. Kinhim too. So this is Yosuke. I literally had to make the font smaller on this slide to try and explain him, because he is lovely. He works really hard. He's caring, but but he's also very insecure, teenage boy who is struggling in a small town to come to terms with his sexuality. I am going to go out and say that is his storyline, because even though they cut the lines in the end, you can see the video on the slide. I'm not going to click play here, but the link will be in the description. Unused English dubbed audio for his romance link. He was going to be romanceable. His storyline was about him coming to terms with being gay for the main character. And, like, they kind of left in all of the insecurity and then just cut the ending, which made it come across very shallow and really undermines the whole storyline of the game, because, I mean, it's supposed to be about, like, looking as your true self, and, like, even if something's hard, you should still be honest about it, and how your friends will support you, and how it's all supposed to be really important, but then they cut it, and it's just not fair, and it really brings a lot of detriment to the storyline, to his storyline, to the wider themes of the game, and I'm sorry, I'll stop. But you get the idea. They did him dirty more than most, and they should bring his romance link back. So this is Chie. She's really cool. She doesn't afraid of anything. She's surprisingly sensible. She loves kung fu. She isn't afraid to shout at people or let them know if she thinks they're wrong. She actually gets on pretty well with Yosuke, even though she gives him a lot of stick. She seems to trust him. She relies on him a lot. I haven't looked into her social link with the main character, but I gather it's quite good. You get to learn more about her personality, more about her backstory. The thing is, she's got a best friend called Yukiko, who she's introduced alongside, and a lot of her sort of self-discovery is entangled with Yukiko. They're childhood best friends, and they're really close. Most people ship the two of them together, and I would be lying if I said I wasn't one of them. I think that it's really nice to sort of perceive, as it were, because it's not like Atlas wrote it this way, but it's how I perceive it, a relationship between two girls that isn't, like, perfect. Like, they have their differences and they have their disagreements and their insecurities. They're not perfect, like, best friends forever, always tell each other everything, always rely on each other. There's a lot of times when they're afraid to lean on each other because they don't want the other one to think lowly of them. And I think that's really true to life. I think it's really nice to imagine them growing and learning together, and becoming better people because of it. So here's the other half of the pair. This is Yukiko. She's got the kind of classic beauty thing going on. She works at a traditional inn that her parents own. She's set to inherit it one day. She tries really hard. That's my cat, sorry. She tries really hard to put forward this sense of refined dignity, but the truth is she's still a teenage girl, and a lot of her storyline is about coming to terms with the fact that, like, she wants to do stuff as well. She doesn't just want to look after her parents' inn, even though she does enjoy that, as it turns out. She also wants to muck around with her friends and run out with her girlfriend, I mean best friend, and just do random shit while she can, because she wants to inherit the inn when she's older, but for right now, she kind of wants to have fun, and I think she should be allowed to. She's also secretly a huge dork, which is very cute. So this is Teddy. Teddy's kind of a cryptid. So you'll see there's two kind of forms here. There's the bear form, and the human form. It's funny that I put like 3 pictures of girl Teddy on here and only like really 1 picture of boy Teddy. Teddy does, identify himself as a boy. So, sort of. He presents as a boy, and in the English adaptions he refers to himself in masculine ways. But I mean, he's a bear. So like, gender doesn't really apply. I feel like it's kind of like just a null issue. I mean, he's a bear. He grew a white twink body for himself, which I think is pretty iconic of him, considering that he did it just by exercising, which is something that I'm sure some of us wish that we could do. Naming no names. Me. He's fairly unpopular in the fandom, but I feel like it's more because his voice is annoying than because of anything to do with his characterization. He comes to live in Yosuke's house, and my favorite thing is that Yosuke's parents just kind of like bring him in and like give him a job and like a mobile phone and stuff, which in Japan your parents have to sign for. So I'm pretty sure he's legally Yosuke's brother now, which is hilarious considering that he technically doesn't exist. Also, he has no internal organs. So this is Kanji. Kanji is amazing. If I had to pick a poster child character for Persona 4, it would be Kanji. He is an absolute icon. As you can see from the pictures, he's quite rough and tough, but his favorite things in the world are cute, fluffy shit. Just like yarn animals and cute origami bunnies and cute people of indeterminate gender. I mean, what? And at the beginning of the story, he's very insecure about it, but throughout his character development, he comes to accept his hobbies for what they are, and he comes to accept himself to a certain extent, with the support of his friends, because shockingly, it's a lot easier to accept yourself if you have friends around you who also accept you. It's not true that you can't be loved until you love yourself. So often the causation is the other way around. Once people around you start to support you and show you the worth in yourself, it's a lot easier to look at yourself and you go, you know what? That's okay. He's, academically not so smart, but he's very witty and sharp. He has a lot of good one-liners. He comes out with the funniest shit sometimes. He's really good. One thing I will say is, I'm not going to talk about my or anybody else's headcanons for him, because I think it's really important that you engage with his arc either through game, anime, or manga, and decide for yourself what you think about him. He's a little bit of a discourse magnet in the English fandom, but that's why I think it's important to see the storyline for yourself, so that you can decide based on canon rather than being predisposed towards one idea or another based on what I think. I want you to be able to do it based on what you think. This is Rise. She's adorable. She's one of the younger characters in the game. There's actually quite a few young characters in Persona 4. The party is very young, because there's actually no third years in the party at all. And then there's Teddy, who seems to be sort of like late middle school. She is an idol and a gravure model, because that's a thing you can do at age 15. It genuinely is. And yes, it's creepy. I'm not afraid to say that. It's creepy. So she's taking a break from those jobs because she's sort of having a little bit of an existential crisis. And she decides to come to the town where all of the murders are happening, because that's going to be great for some rest and recuperation. At first, she struggles a lot to connect to people because she's so wary of people only being interested in her for her work. but as the story progresses and as she faces her shadow, she comes out of her shell a lot more, and she comes to learn that like the reason she's so peppy as an idol is because there is a part of her that is peppy, and that it doesn't mean she's being fake, it just means she's showing a different side of her to different people. She is pretty relatable in a lot of ways. She canonically has a huge crush on the main character. It's up to you as a player how you respond to it. She does get disappointed if you turn her down, but she doesn't make it weird as far as I'm aware. Don't quote me on that. In the anime, it's hilarious how completely uninterested Soji is in anything to do with dating her. Like, he'll hang out with her and be chill and be having fun, and then as soon as she tries to make it romantic, he just shuts down. And I think it's almost why she's doing this with him, because it kind of makes it safe for her, because she can explore that side of herself without feeling, I guess, pressured or in any way like she needs to do something to please him, because at the end of the day, he doesn't want anything. So this is Naoto. Naoto is a cinnamon roll in disguise. He is a first-year student, but he works as a contractor detective for the police. Basically, whenever they're having trouble with a case, they call him in, they get him to take a look at it, get him to share his ideas, and then they send him away again. I'm not even sure he gets paid. I think he does. He's an absolute discourse magnet. If you've seen his face before, if you've ever been on Tumblr, it was probably something to do with that discourse. Strongly recommend, if you've never seen any media about him, don't Google him, don't look him up, don't look for fan art, don't do anything. Just go straight to the game, the anime or the manga, consume his story arc, and decide what you think. It is possible to spoil his story arc, so that's kind of why this slide is a bit scant. I didn't want to say too much and ruin things, so he's a really good character, he's really compelling, he's really relatable, he's good. Please, whatever you think about him, love him, because he's important. So, like with Persona 3, there are some other important characters. Again, I'm not going to cover all of the social links. What I'm going to cover is characters that are important to the main story, and also characters that are just important. You'll see what I mean. Just don't. Seriously. Don't. So Margaret is this game's Velvet Room attendant. So the Velvet Room took this form where Igor, that you can see in the background slide there, sits in the center and helps the protagonist fuse cards while the attendant does most of the talking. Margaret is a lot more measured than Elizabeth was. She's very dignified, but she also definitely has a cheeky side. She can be very... she goes against the rules several times during the game, and is just like, yeah, I'm breaking the law now, without, like, excusing herself or elaborating. She just does it. She's very cool. She does get a crush on the protagonist. It's a bit hard to say if it's creepy or not, because although she has an adult form, the Velvet Room attendants really aren't human at all. We don't know how old she is or how old her psyche is. It's not really clear if she even wants to make a move on him. I'm not even sure if you can romance her or not. So it's a bit hard to put that on a scale of sort of how it matches up with the other romance links. But she's really interesting. You don't get to see too much of her, but whenever she shows up, she's always got something interesting to say. So Ryotaro Dojima is the uncle that you go to live with. He was relatively recently bereaved of his wife. The death was only a couple of years ago, and he's very much still processing that loss. He doesn't seem to have gone to any sort of counselling. He doesn't seem to have time. He barely seems to have time to do anything. He's barely ever home at the beginning of the game. You do have a social link with him, and he does have some quite good character development. I don't have any personal experience with it, but as an outsider, it seemed like quite a compelling portrayal of single fatherhood in Japan. So see what you think of it. I think he's a good dad who tries his best, even if sometimes he doesn't hit the mark. This is his daughter, Nanako Dojima. She's very small. She's very important. She's hardworking and dedicated and kind to her friends. You get to know her a little bit better from her own perspective. In the manga by Shuta Zagabe, she is very important to the main plot, and she's very important to Soji. She loves the sort of chain department store in town because she likes the bright colours and the music. If you've ever known a 6-year-old, you know that they pick something really random. I think mine when I was little was Woolworths, and for some reason I was obsessed with Woolworths. It could be anything, it could be a particular dinosaur, or it can be a department store. She's just really cute. She is a cinnamon roll. I know I mentioned in Persona 3 that the child character there resisted the temptation to be cinnamon rolled. Nanako is just the cinnamon roll. She just is. She's small, she's cute, she's never does anything wrong. She works hard. It's not all sunshine and roses with her. She does have some difficult things that she deals with. And there's a couple of bits of her social link that get quite emotional. I think that's really important. That even though she is small and precious, she doesn't get kind of whitewashed. So she's definitely one to pay attention to. If only because she's cute. This is Mari. She is only in the Golden remake version of the game. She's a resident of the Velvet Room, who Margaret asks Soji to take care of. She seems quite young to me, sort of 14, 15 years old, kind of late middle school age. And she has amnesia. She gets called a Mary Sue in the fandom quite a lot, but because to me she comes across as quite young, I almost think she portrays herself that way on purpose. I think that once I started viewing her as being a middle school kid, basically, I warmed up to her a lot, because all of a sudden the things that before were annoyingly juvenile, I was like, you know what, this is actually like appropriate age behaviour for her. You can romance her. It's not personally to my taste, because she always struck me as being more of a younger sister figure, but your mileage may vary. She may be your best girl. She has a big main plot that comes out towards the end of Persona 4 Golden. Pay attention to everything she says. It will become important. This is Toru Adachi. So the cabbage is because there's a running joke that, because his job doesn't pay very well, he can't really afford good food, so he eats a lot of, like, fried cabbage and, like, boiled cabbage and stuff. And he seems to have developed a taste for it, so pretty much every time you see him with a shopping bag, there's just a cabbage in there and maybe a beer. He's kind of a dork. He's, kind of cute in a weird way. Like the kind of character that makes you want to bully them, even if you're not typically disposed towards bullying. Oh, that's my alarm. I'm doing these in one take, by the way, because at time of speaking, this video is already half an hour long. So I don't want to go back and have to edit things, especially when I'm basically just talking so that you don't get bored while trying to read the slides. Adachi is really interesting. You only get to social link with him if you play Persona 4 Golden. I personally think it's worth doing, but I don't know if I'd recommend it for first playthrough because, obviously he's a detective, so lots of it links into the main story. I would probably, I'd say go ahead and do it, but like, just be aware that, he is giving you extra information because he is a detective. So if certain plot points seem predictable, it's going to be more because you are able to social link with him and less because everybody else is dumb. This is what I meant by other important characters. So just like Persona 3, Persona 4 has a character that is just an animal. It doesn't talk. It's not in the party this time, but it can give you healing if you can pay for it. It's a fox. It's just a fox. At the end, it has babies. And there are cats. These only really show up in the game. This is the number one argument for playing the game over watching the anime or reading the manga. There are cats. You can pet the cats. Soji literally gives himself a quest. It says in your quest log, by myself, to myself. Objective, pet the floodplain cats. It's very important. You can feed them fish, you can play with them. It's very cute. So, if I'm talking about Persona 4, I also have to talk about Persona 4 spin-offs, because some of them are canon. There are quite a few because this game bankrolled Atlas for like 7, 8, 9, 10 years. And it's sort of still going because Persona 4 characters have been added to BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle recently, and like, it's still going, fam. But there are really only 3 that are actually canon and important to their main story. So those are the ones I'm just going to briefly cover here. So after Persona 4 finishes, there are 3 spin-offs that take place. There's also 2 more spin-offs that I'm going to highlight as being important. Persona Q Shadow the Labyrinth takes place during Persona 4, sort of. And the Persona 4 the Magician manga I highly recommend, but only after you've finished the main game. Technically it takes place before and straddles the beginning of the game, but because of how it's structured, it makes so much more sense if you read it after you've finished the main game at least once. So Persona 4 Arena has Aigus's older sister. It's got a genuinely cool, if slightly contrived plot. I personally, if you're not into fighting games, because it is a fighting game and not an RPG, I recommend reading the manga adaptation of it by Ayakyu. It follows Yosuke's route in the game. You may also want to look up YouTube videos following the story of the game. If you need help finding good ones, then feel free to leave a comment and I'll try and find one for you from another YouTuber. Generally speaking, the plot is engaging. You get to see the Persona 3 cast again. You get to learn what they've been up to in the meantime. And you also get to see the Persona 4 kids sort of a few months on from the end. Ironically, it kind of contradicts the epilogue from Persona 4 Golden, but also I feel like it almost doesn't matter, just because it's sort of got more plot attached to it. So, in a way, it's the superior epilogue. Arena Ultimax follows on directly from Arena, continuing the same plot. It adds in some more characters. The manga adaptation for this one was done by a different mangaka, Rokuda Saito. He is amazing. His characterization's pretty good. Not that we read scanlations. We don't read scanlations, but in theory, if we did, the scanlation of this one that's floating about online is not necessarily translated too well. I found it made a lot more sense after I'd watched some actual videos of the actual game and then went back to the scanlation that I am not reading and do not recommend, just because I once I knew the basic plot, I understood what was going on in the manga a lot more. I feel like it's less the mangaka's fault, more this is the reason we don't read scanlations. And then we have Persona 4 Dancing All Night. It's disconnected from the other two. It's a rhythm game. It has the longest intro known to man. I've not done it personally, but it is an absurdly long time between booting up the game and actually getting to do any rhythm game stuff. But personally, it's worth it. The songs are cute, the dances are cute, Nanako is there's a new character, sort of. It's a reoccurring character from Risei's Social Link, and it's just a cute, fun game with sort of most of a plot. One more thing that's really important. So, as soon as you say to anybody, I was thinking of getting into Persona 4, they will try and tell you about this fan comic. It's named the Heme Daisy comic, or the Heme Daisy dub, because there is a dub version of it. The links on this slide I will drop in the video description as well. It's infamous. You will notice a lot of the panels that I picked up here as meme formats that have gained wider kind of traction, because GGDG is a genuinely funny person. They've gone on to do all sorts of independent projects, as well as some quite popular Kirby fan art. Strongly recommend their work, both this comic and their wider works as well. So that's it for the Persona 4 section. You can skip the spin-offs. They don't really impact the plot of Persona 5 at all. It's only if you want to know what's going on next, or you just really want to play a fighting game or a rhythm game. Each Persona game focuses on a completely new location, cast, and storyline. Persona 5 doesn't yet have any spin-offs that link it into the previous games the way that Persona 4's do to Persona 3. So this is the last time that we will see the Persona 3 or the Persona 4 cast. We will go on to Persona 5, which is the flavour of the month, year, decade, I guess.